And welcome back to Coastal Daybreak here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And joining us here today is producer of a movie I'm very excited about seeing when it's about to come out, Hacksaw Ridge, and produced by Mel Gibson, and also by our guest is Terry Benedict. And Terry is with us now. Hi, Terry. How are you?
Hi. Good to be with you.
This is a very exciting project. You were behind the documentary, the award-winning documentary that also highlighted the story of Army medic Desmond Doss. What was it that drew you to this story?
Well, that goes all the way back to when I was 10 years old. I grew up, my parents thought that it was best that we didn't have a TV, not because we couldn't afford one, because they just didn't want us unduly influenced. And so I read a lot. I read voraciously, in fact. And so, you know, as young boys often do, they're attracted to war stories, heroes, and so I went through the whole World War II canon of 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, Guadalcanal Diary, you know, all those books, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I came across this book called The Unlikeliest Hero that was the story about Desmond Doss, a guy who wouldn't carry a weapon, had a deep faith in God. All he wanted to do was be a combat medic, and he got a lot of abuse and harassment during training. He actually volunteered during World War II. He wasn't drafted, so he had a legitimate deferment if he wanted it. But he wanted to be a combat medic and be helpful and support the war effort. And then all this abuse happened, and then during the Battle of Okinawa, his company of men just got decimated. Only about 40 made it off the cliff under their own power. And, of course, there were several dozen killed outright, and then he lowered approximately 75 over the cliff of injured with a rope under heavy fire. And so the guys who hated him came to recommend and nominate him for the Medal of Honor, which he did receive. And so it's the first time a conscientious objector ever received the Medal of Honor. And that story just kind of made my little young brain spin around a few times trying to figure out the math of how all that happened. And
well, you must have then, even at such a young age, this is kind of rattling around with you for a long time. When did it come to fruition that this could actually become a true documentary?
Well, I didn't grow up wanting to be a filmmaker. That came near the end of my high school years. But I met Desmond a couple of years after reading the book at a church summer camp, and that sort of kept that fire lit in me. And he was a very humble man. He really loved kids, and you just felt really warm and fuzzy hanging around him. I mean, it was like being around Grandpa. And so later on in my film career, in the right at the end of the 90s, I visited with Desmond at a Medal of Honor reunion, and we got to spend time together, and I really saw how the other recipients, really, truly honored and respected him. In fact, he was their chaplain. They appointed him their chaplain, and they really loved him dearly. And I talked to Desmond. His health was starting to fade, and I talked to him about how important I thought it was to do a documentary while he was still alive, and that would be the surefire way of protecting the integrity of his story and protect the essence of his character. I mean, because frankly, when you read his Medal of Honor citation, it reads like a big fish story. I mean, it's just not possible that he could have done all this stuff, because typically they're awarded for a single event the valor. And Desmond, it's just like one thing after another, after another, after another, and it just keeps going on. It's like, this is impossible. So in 2000 is when I started the documentary, and it took me 3.5 years to do, and we finished in spring of 2004, and went on a very, very successful film festival circuit. It was winning all kinds of awards. We were very blessed. Had a lot of firsts to it. It was at the beginning of the high-def world, so Canon and Panasonic were two of my sponsors, and then I started talking to production companies and producers about doing the movie version, the feature-length film, the narrative, and I met Bill Mechanic, who was the former president of 20th Century Fox Studios, and he had gone into being an independent producer. And one of the things, as I promised Desmond, was to protect the purity of the story. Bill got all of that, and he got the magnitude of the story,
right?
And so he really became the primary producer and the champion through the development process, which lasted about 10 plus years.
Wow!
And then a couple of years ago, Mel Gibson came on board. Mel, being a faith-driven guy, he understood too the enormity and the importance of the story, especially from a faith-based perspective and serving God and country. And so Mel, I couldn't have been happier with Mel coming on board. And the other thing that Mel, being an extraordinary filmmaker, brought to the table was he had to walk a fine line, telling a story about a medic. There's going to be graphic things. Being a medic is all about cleaning up the carnage of war, which is not a pleasant sight. And so Mel really balanced in a magnificent way the graphic nature of the film to put in proper context the heroics of Desmond Doss.
Well, I think from Mel Gibson's previous works, we understand that how he maintained that balance in such an excellent way. But I want to go to the faith story here, is because it sounds like, from what you're telling me, I'm just sitting here practically with my mouth on the floor just about the story of Desmond Doss, not knowing that much about it. So this must have been, just being around him, being around those who liked him, being around the people who got the story up until the time with Mel Gibson. These are people who understood how Desmond Doss represented the love of God.
Exactly. And I think for people that call themselves Christians, we all get uncomfortable when we then start talking about our responsibility is to be Christ-like. Because we think, well, wait a minute, we really can't we can't be Christ. And it's like, no, we're Christ-like. That's
right.
What the definition of a Christian. Desmond embodied that in very practical terms, day to day. And just imagine, the fact that he was taking abuse, and his commanding officer, Jack Glover, who I became very close friends with up until the point he passed away. He basically said to Desmond on a number of times, in fact, it's in the documentary, he says, "You'll never be by my damn side without a weapon." And Desmond said, "Oh, yes, I will. I'll be there saving life while you're taking life." And Jack said, "Oh, no, you're not." And so imagine flash forwarding to the top of Hacksaw Ridge, the Maeda Escarpment, in Okinawa, where Jack gets hit with an artillery shell and his chest is blown open, and he's having his come to Jesus moment right then and there. He wasn't going to make it, and then the very guy he hated so much is standing over him saying, I'm gonna get you out of here." His savior, literally that day, was Desmond Doss, and Jack lived to be 92 years old.
Wow. And just incredible story. So looking so forward to this movie. Now, how was it translating this into a feature film? Do you feel like it really did capture Desmond's essence? Yeah,
it did. It's people often ask me, because when they see the documentary is like a library, a wealth of information, and it has its own emotional beats and roller coaster ride to it. And the thing is, trying to compress a man's life, or even part of his life, the war experience primarily, into a couple of hours, it's a challenge. And so, yes, there's some compositing, yes, there's some compression, that sort of thing. But the essence And this is why, I made this promise to Desmond to protect that essence of his character, as did, Bill embodied that. Mel took that on as his own mantra as well. That you watch that film, and many veterans have now, several thousand, have seen this film, and they walk away saying it's the most authentic, closest thing to what happens on a battlefield and the dynamics of between soldiers that goes on that they've ever seen. And in fact, not to get on a sidebar too much, but I was at the Skyball benefit in Dallas as Gary Sinise's guest, and they screened Hacksaw there, and their theme this year was special operations. And so at our table after the screening, and we were having dinner, at our table sitting next to me was General Mulholland, who was the commanding general, of special ops at the time of 9/11. And he turned to me and he said, that film blew me away. He said, I am recommending to all special ops that they need to go see this film, which I couldn't have been, first I'm happy being as a producer on the project, but more what made me feel the best was the fact that it was validation that the story, we got the story right for those men and women who serve, and it captures at least a bit of the essence that we want the general public to understand what our servicemen and women go through and and the sacrifices that they do. And I think that that's a very important thing and certainly relevant, especially today, because I do think there's a bit of a disconnect,
right.
that's going on. So I was very appreciative of him saying that.
Terry Benedict is our guest, one of the producers of the Hacksaw Ridge movie, and also the producer of the original documentary of Desmond Doss. As this is unfolding and coming together, and Desmond, by this time you're making the movie, Desmond has passed away, right?
Yeah, Desmond passed away in March of '06, 2 years after we finished the documentary. I saw him 3 days before he passed away, and
yeah. So as the movie is being made, you have to feel that he's guiding your hand.
Yeah, I still miss him.
Mm-hmm. I can tell. Tell that by talking with you about this. He would be very, very happy with how the film turned out. He was extremely happy with how the documentary turned out, because he knew, and I told him, I would joke around with him. I'd say, you're not going to live forever. You're going to kick the bucket here pretty soon, probably. And he would laugh, and he said, you don't think I'm going to? I said, no. I said, I think we better hurry up and get this doc done. And when he saw it, he had never been to a theater before. And when he saw it on a 50-foot screen at our world premiere in California, wow.
at the festival, he just had a big grin, and it was because he felt like we truly had honored his faith and his faith journey, and giving credit where he wanted to see it given, which was not to him but to God, and that he could now know that in perpetuity his story would live in a very accurate setting. And then, it's a rare thing that a feature film has a documentary to have as its cornerstone. And in fact, I brought Andrew Garfield down to Chattanooga, where Desmond lived his whole adult life. Andrew really wanted to get inside Desmond's skin and learn everything he could about Desmond. And so I spent time with him, took him up to Virginia, to Lynchburg, where Desmond grew up, and let him go through a very tactile experience of touching, feeling, smelling, tasting, seeing, everything that was Desmond, that was important to Desmond when he was growing up, including walking around the train trestle and seeing where Desmond put pennies on the track and watched the train smash them. And worked with his accent and gestures, and he was just full of questions. Andrew truly wanted to play this very authentically and give Desmond honor for giving it 100%. And so if you watch the documentary, and then you watch Hacksaw, you will see this amazing, seamless transition from Desmond and Verte to Andrew's performance of Desmond, and it is so seamless. It just is uncanny how close he gets it. And in fact, earlier this week when I was at the Hollywood premiere with everybody, Desmond Jr. Got to come to the show. And so I was talking with Andrew just after the film had screened, and he came up and he said, "You nailed my father spot on. It couldn't have been any better."
That's fantastic. Again, Terry Benedict, Hacksaw Ridge. Make plans to see it. It is, I think, just from watching the trailer, you've seen the trailers on TV, and just knowing how many veterans that we have, World War II veterans that we have listening, that the number of active duty and veterans that probably know this story, who will want to see this, and also so many folks who want to see what it is like to be Christ-like will want to see this as well. Hacksaw Ridge. Hope that you'll make plans to see it soon. And Terry Benedict, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Such an honor.